Hello and welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. On today's show, we have Zach Smith from the Heritage Foundation. He's going to be joining us to talk about the Colorado Supreme Court barring Donald Trump from the state ballot in 2024 and the ruling that he's disqualified due to the 14th Amendment. Section 3 clause of the Constitution. So he'll be joining us to talk about that and the implications about that. Also, we're going to be talking about illegal immigration. We've seen an influx at the border, the highest one-day total that we've experienced, 12,500 illegals at the border. We're going to be talking about the implications that will have on you in your daily life. And we're going to close out the show with the top 9 degenerate Democrat scandals under Joe Biden. And this is Christmas time. It's time for these sinners to get right with Jesus, don't you say? Or wouldn't you say? All that and more coming up. All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show, guys. I just recently gave my ghetto fabulous rant about the Colorado Supreme Court case that kicked Donald Trump off of the ballot, hopefully temporarily. But I wanted to make sure that we brought in an expert to speak to, and you guys know him. He's been on my podcast before, and I'm glad you guys are being introduced to him. If you're seeing him for the first time on the Salem News Channel, I'm not sure. Anyway, Zach Smith, he's a constitutional attorney for the Heritage Foundation. Zach, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show.
Well, always great to be with you, Carl. Thank you for having me on once again.
All right, absolutely, Zach. Now, listen. I mean, you're a constitutional attorney, so you always kind of keep me in line when I go off the rails here. But I do want to get your take on this. You know, I look at this Supreme Court case in Colorado, which is absolutely absurd, and we'll get into some of the details here in just a sec. But do conservatives need to come to this reality that the left wants to dismantle the Constitution? They're not trying to uphold it. I feel like that's a belief system that we need to understand, because I feel like a lot of conservatives really don't understand how bad this is and how much worse it could get going forward.
Well, Carl, every time I talk with you, I feel like I'm saying we are in unprecedented territory. And I have to say that again here today. We've talked about we've never before had a former president who's been indicted. We've never before had a leading presidential candidate who's facing multiple lawsuits, multiple criminal indictments across multiple jurisdictions. And never before have we had a state Supreme Court remove a leading presidential candidate from the ballot. And so when I say we are in uncharted territory, we are really in uncharted territory. And before we get to the legal aspect of this, and there's a lot to talk about on that front, I think from a purely political, pragmatic perspective, one of the reasons you haven't traditionally seen this type of lawfare being engaged in by either the left or the right is because there's a recognition that what's good for the goose today is going to be good for the gander tomorrow. And you'll get into this dangerous tit for tat back and forth. We're already hearing some talk of that with Texas's lieutenant governor suggesting that Joe Biden could be removed from the ballot in those states. But look, this is unprecedented territory we're in, and I think all Americans should be concerned about this development out of Colorado.
All right, so there's a couple of things that I want to throw at you, and we've actually discussed these before in great detail, but they're using Amendment 14, Section 3 of the Constitution. I mean, this is basically giving slaves citizenship. And also, I mean, when you go to Section 3, this is like, listen, we don't want former Confederates in our federal government. And it's talking about insurrection, if you've engaged in insurrection, but it's based upon somebody that is actually engaged in insurrection. And here you have a former president that was never charged, I mean, let alone convicted of insurrection. This is crazy town.
Well, I think you're right, Carl. We can't divorce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment from its historical context. You're absolutely correct. It was passed in the wake of the Civil War about a concern that many ex-high-ranking Confederates would come into the federal government, essentially nullify many aspects of Union policy in favor of the former Confederacy's policy, and no one wanted that. And so they passed this provision of the 14th Amendment, which was one of many provisions that basically said that, if you engaged in insurrection against the United States, you wouldn't be eligible to hold office under the Constitution unless Congress removed the disability. And so there's several interesting legal questions that flow from that. One of the very real legal questions is whether or not Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was confined to its unique historical circumstances in the wake of the Civil War, or whether it's still effective today. That's particularly true when you consider that Congress actually passed two amnesty acts, one in 1872 and another in 1898, that actually removed the disability of many former Confederates to hold office. And so there's a very real open legal question whether Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is still effective today. And that's one that the Colorado Supreme Court really didn't address. Then you mentioned also about whether or not Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. There's been no criminal court that has found that. And in fact, the only judicial body or quasi-judicial body that considered the question, the Senate, during Donald Trump's second impeachment trial, when they were hearing that case against him, they actually acquitted him of that very conduct that the Colorado Supreme Court is now saying he committed. And so it's really just a bizarre situation in some ways. But again, we are in unprecedented territory with the Colorado Supreme Court taking this action to essentially remove him from the ballot.
All right, a couple of questions. One, Special Counsel Jack Smith never even in his indictments against Trump never ever charged him with insurrection. So that part is crazy to me. And then, how is it that a Colorado Supreme Court has the authority, and maybe the question is, do they have the authority to do what they did? Not only to remove Trump from the ballot, but to say, Zach, that people can't even write him in.
Yeah, it's a great question, Carl, and one that has a somewhat convoluted answer to it.
Okay.
If we think back to all of the election litigation after 2020, after 2022, we know that states, particularly state legislatures, have primary authority for setting the rules and procedures that govern elections in their state, even for federal elections. And so there's a provision in Colorado's election code that essentially says the Secretary of State can only list, quote, qualified candidates on the ballot.
Wow.
And so we know the Constitution lays down certain benchmarks for the president. They have to be 35 years old. They have to meet certain residency requirements. They have to be a natural-born citizen. And so if someone doesn't meet those requirements, they clearly wouldn't be constitutionally qualified to be president. But what the petitioners in this case, the people who brought this case, are saying is that because, in their view, Donald Trump engaged in insurrection, even though there's not been a court finding to that effect, that he would not be qualified under Colorado law and would essentially be constitutionally ineligible to appear on the ballot in the same way as if he were not a natural-born citizen or didn't meet the residency requirements or wasn't 35 years old. And so it's because of that Colorado election law provision requiring only qualified candidates to appear on the ballot that the Colorado Supreme Court and Colorado courts in general took jurisdiction of this case.
Okay, all right. That's a very important point. I'm glad you clarified that. And in my Ghetto Fabulous rant earlier, Zach, I think I mentioned the Colorado AG, but it wasn't the AG. It was the Secretary of State that is able to make that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Correct. No, that's absolutely right. Each state sets up their election administration a little bit differently. But my understanding is in Colorado, and typically in most states, is going to be the Secretary of State that's in charge of election administration. But one quick point, kind of keying off of that, Carl, if I can, is,
sure,
one of the very troubling things about the logical implications of the argument that's being put forward in Colorado, essentially, and it may vary from state to state, but essentially it would allow any election official to determine in his or her own judgment that Donald Trump would not be qualified, that couldn't appear on the ballot. And so you could be in the very bizarre situation that in some states, even local election officials are taking him off the ballot within their jurisdiction. So he could be on the ballot in some parts of the state, not in other parts of the state. And again, I think it just goes to show really the chaotic effect that this ruling may have.
Yeah, you know what, and we just have 2 minutes left in this block. I'm speaking to Zach Smith, and you can read his work at the Daily Signal Heritage Foundation. He's a constitutional attorney. If I took time to give you all of his accolades, we would run out of time. So I'll just tell you that he's a constitutional attorney. I love reading his work, both at the Daily Signal and Heritage Foundation. Daily Signal just basically being kind of the blog, the condensed version of some of the longer studies that they do. But anyway, Zach Smith is who I'm speaking to. Zach, I think some conservatives are, and probably the most ardent Trump supporters, in my opinion, or don't take this serious enough. Like, I think people, for the most part, understand, okay, this is crazy. This is uncharted territory. But the left does not care at all, one iota, about the Constitution. I'm concerned about other states, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Michigan, places that have, I believe, Democrat secretaries of state that could all of a sudden say, well, you know what, we're not going to throw them on the ballot. And then all next year, if Trump is the nominee, all of the resources are used fighting these cases rather than trying to win an election and screwing down ballot races. We have 40 seconds left in this block.
Well, I think your fear is well-founded, Carl. In fact, just after the Colorado Supreme Court released their decision, we saw the California Lieutenant Governor sending a letter to the California Secretary of State, essentially asking to be explored in ways to keep Donald Trump off of the ballot there. Now, ironically, the California Lieutenant Governor got one of the black letter requirements for presidency wrong in her letter. She said you had to be 40 years old and, quote, not an insurrectionist. Of course, the Constitution says you only have to be 35. So, you can't make this stuff up. But yeah, absolutely. I think that fear is well-founded, Carl, and one we should all be worried about as well.
All right. We'll be back. More with Zach Smith after the break. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. I'm joined with my guest, Zach Smith of the Heritage Foundation. He is a constitutional attorney with the Heritage Foundation. And again, I bring Zach on to, you guys know that I'm a little ghetto fabulous at times. And so he kind of keeps me in line. I want to make sure that the things that are coming out of my mouth, no matter how bodacious they may sound, they have some context that's absolutely correct. and so when I read Zach Smith stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm in the right territory. All right. So anyway, Zach, I appreciate you taking time this morning to join us. I know that you are a busy man right now. Again, we're speaking of this Colorado Supreme Court barring Donald Trump from the state's ballot in 2024. Zach, I know this is unprecedented, but what are your biggest concerns with this case going forward and the impact that it could have on the country, on the judicial system?
Well, I think we were mentioning some of those concerns at the end of the last segment, Carl. Certainly there's a real worry that other states will pursue a similar path. Again, we've already seen the California Lieutenant Governor trying to capitalize on this ruling out of Colorado. It's also placed the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a somewhat not awkward, but less than ideal situation. They're going to be asked to step into this case, I imagine. No matter what they decide, it's going to be spun, I'm sure, as a partisan decision. And I think this plays into the left's goal, more largely, of undermining the Supreme Court as an institution because it's delivering results that are no longer reliably liberal.
Yes.
They've reset back to a more constitutionally sound mindset, staying within their proper role within the three branches of government. So that's certainly a concern. But look, there are very real questions that need to be resolved in this case. And again, we've talked about some of them, about Section 3, the 14th Amendment, its unique historical circumstances. There's a question whether Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is self-executing or whether Congress would have to pass legislation to affirmatively provide an enforcement mechanism for it, as it has for other provisions of the 14th Amendment. And then there's there's a question of whether Donald Trump the presidency would even qualify as being an officer of the United States for purposes of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And so the U.S. Supreme Court can certainly resolve this case in a number of ways. There are also some procedural issues involved in this case that they could use to kind of avoid the major substantive questions. But at the end of the day, I think this is the U.S. Supreme Court is certainly going to be asked to hear this case, and it'll be very interesting to watch and see what they do with that request.
Okay, let me. I want to read to you just a quote, just a small snippet of the majority opinion from the Supreme Court of Colorado and get your take on that. They say, we conclude that because President Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it would be a wrongful act. Actually, this is, I believe, from the Secretary of State. It would be a wrongful act under the election code for the secretary to list President Trump as a candidate on the presidential primary ballot. Therefore, the secretary may not list President Trump's name on the 2024 presidential primary ballot, nor may she count any write-in votes cast for him. We've basically covered that. I'm looking at the wrong quote here. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry, guys, because this is crazy. I'm sorry. Here it is, Zach. Here's what I wanted to read to you. I'm sorry. In issuing the stay, this opinion is just basically at a standstill until at least January 4th, from what I understand. But They say here, Zach, we do not reach these conclusions lightly. We are mindful of the magnitude and weight of the questions now before us. We are likewise mindful of our solemn duty to apply the law without fear or favor and without being swayed by public reaction to the decisions that the law mandates we reach. I find that statement hard to believe when you are literally circumventing the will of the people with a president that has never been charged. I'd like to know, I'd like to get your response to that statement, but I'd like to know, is there any ramifications? Are there any consequences, or could there be, for judges that just go off the rail like this?
Well, I think it's hard to say that the law clearly compelled this result when it was a 4-3 decision. So 3 of the justices on the Colorado Supreme Court dissented from this decision. And the Colorado Supreme Court is itself not known for being particularly conservative. In fact, I think generally it'd be considered a left-leaning court. And so the fact that 3 of the 7 justices dissented from this decision, I think, is noteworthy. Now, they mostly did so on procedural grounds, but still, I think that's an important factor to consider. But look, Carl, I think, again, we have to place this particular suit in the larger context. Going back to 2020, 2016, even before that, there's been a very aggressive push, particularly by those on the left, to engage in lawfare in an effort to affect elections. And in the lead up to 2020, we saw this in particular with lawsuits that sought to change the rules and procedures, even as some voters were already casting their ballot. And so this is a continuation of this, and I think it's very harmful for us as a country whenever you have this lawfare being engaged in, essentially trying to take decisions out of the hands of voters. And so the only silver lining, if there is one, to this lawsuit is that at least it is being brought early enough where there is the potential for the U.S. Supreme Court to step in and resolve this issue before any votes are actually being cast. But certainly this is less than an ideal situation. But again, just a continuation of that lawfare that we've seen for the past several election cycles.
Zach, you bring up a very great point that I want to piggyback on concerning this lawfare, because again, as you rightly stated, and this is one of my concerns, and this is why I tell conservatives, freedom lovers, people that want to see this nation restored to greatness and our Judeo-Christian value system. Listen, we can't take these elections and these polls. I get so frustrated with conservatives just focusing on polls, and when I'm like, Democrats have a plan. We talk about about polls, they have a plan, and one of the plans is their get out the vote efforts, with Joe Biden literally using departments of the federal government in order to register voters. But I'm more concerned about this lawfare, and where I really don't see that Republicans have done a great deal of fighting to make sure when it comes to the election laws, we don't have a repeat kind of 2020 where the laws are willy-nilly. Is there something in the works that you're aware of where maybe you can offer a silver lining there, where conservatives, Republicans are like, hey, we're taking this fight back to make sure that, the day of the election, Democrat or blue cities aren't counting votes well after the all of the ballots should have been cast and counted?
Yeah, after the past several election cycles, Carl, this is definitely something that I think conservatives and really all Americans, regardless of political stripe, are paying attention to now. And so I encourage anyone, if you want to know what the election laws are in your state, what the rules and procedures are, what your legislature is doing, what court decisions have impacted it, you can go to heritage.org. We have something called an election integrity scorecard. We actually rank all of the states and the District of Columbia from best to worst in terms of their election practices. So you can at least get an understanding of where your state stands, how it ranks in relation to other states. But this is something conservatives, and again, all Americans really are paying attention to in the lead up to the 2024 election. And I suspect that will only increase as we get closer to Election Day this year.
Man. Okay, I'm going to check that out. That is at the Heritage Foundation. The Election Integrity Scorecard is what we would have to look up to find that information. Is that correct, Zach?
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely right, Carl.
Okay.
You can find it at heritage.org. If you go to my Twitter feed, at TZ Smith, that's at TZ Smith, you can find links to it there as well. But yeah, I encourage all of your viewers and listeners to check that out because it will give a good sense of where things stand today.
Okay, Zach, we have just a minute and a half remaining. How do you suggest the conservative movement fight back against this what I see as wrongful doing by this Supreme Court of Colorado? What arguments would you be making? How would you be attacking this issue?
Well, I think there are really two buckets of arguments, Carl. There's the legal arguments, which we've talked about, and then there's the practical, political, pragmatic arguments as well. On the legal front, again, I think there are very real open questions about whether Donald Trump qualifies as an officer of the United States, whether Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is self-executing, whether there needs to be a criminal finding or some other finding of insurrection before the Colorado Supreme Court could take this action. So there are a host of open legal questions. From the political pragmatic side, I think we all need to continue beating the drum, highlighting how dangerous this is for our country, where essentially you have these lawfare efforts designed to deprive voters of a choice for president that clearly, based on the polling today, is one that many Americans are interested in returning to office.
Yeah, absolutely insane. Listen, Zach Smith of the Heritage Foundation, man, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man to come and educate our audience. Really do appreciate the work that you're doing. In 15 seconds or less, where can people go to find you?
Yeah, you can find me at heritage.org. You can find me on X, formerly Twitter, at TZ Smith. That's at TZ Smith. And I hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
Welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. I appreciate you guys joining me today. Guys, if you would please subscribe to my podcast. You can find it wherever you go to get your podcast. The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. I'm on Apple, Google, Spotify, you name it. Wherever you go to get your podcast, The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. Also on all things social media, wherever I am. That includes X, that includes Facebook, that includes Instagram. You can find me at The Carl Jackson Show. That is at The Carl Jackson Show. We would definitely appreciate a follow there. If you're on YouTube and Rumble, if you like to watch us on video, if you would review the show give us the highest rating possible, we would certainly appreciate that. That will help us to move up the charts, and that will allow for more people to be able to watch our show. And I would certainly appreciate that, and I'm so thankful for you guys for doing that. I wanted to bring Zach Smith on, and I hope that you guys enjoyed that interview with Zach Smith, because here's what I want conservatives to understand. This fight is much bigger than I think a lot of conservatives may even understand, because there's the mantra that is out there. Yeah, I mean, I'll vote for Donald Trump whether he's in jail or not, and if he's the nominee, and frankly, so would I. But that doesn't mean that what the left is doing is not effective and taking a toll. It is. And if secretaries of state across the country do the same thing and follow suit as Colorado, then we could be in real danger for 2024. And you also heard Zach Smith mention how this lawfare issue has not been resolved. Republicans have not done a great job with lawfare. Meanwhile, the Democrat Party, that is what they do. That is their playbook. So we're worried about polls, but they have a plan. They have a plan, and we have to get that in our heads. We're going to have to show up in mass, in numbers unheard of, to win in 2024. It doesn't matter if it's Trump. It doesn't matter if it's DeSantis. You have to show up in mass, and you have to bring someone along. And I would encourage you, don't take what the left is doing lightly. That's why, sometimes, obviously, I have a big mouth, on being on radio. But that's why I bring in people like Zach Smith, the experts, the lawyers that deal with this type of stuff on a daily basis, that can say, yeah, this is a stupid decision by the Supreme Court, but it doesn't mean it's going to be an easy fight in the courtroom, because there's so much nuance to it, unless the Supreme Court, Lord willing, they will come in and they shoot it down. And I want you to consider this as well. Again, this is bigger than Trump. This is bigger than Colorado. I want you to think about who else is disenfranchised. So the Colorado Supreme Court said, listen, Trump isn't on the ballot, right? You can't even write Trump in on the ballot. But this doesn't just disenfranchise Trump. This disenfranchises every primary candidate. Because if they can do it to him, they can do it to whomever, right? They can do it to DeSantis supporters. They can do it to Nikki Haley or Vivek supporters. So I think we have to understand that it doesn't just stop with Trump. This disenfranchises everyone, because now you have other voters that may not get a say. What do people tend to naturally do? When you go against our guy, we're going to back him, right? But that, we have to be honest, that disenfranchises other primary voters, whether you want them in the race or not. There are many people that were arguing, and I totally disagree with this. I totally think it's un-American that the RNC should just shut down the primaries because Donald Trump is leading he's so far ahead. That is the most un-American, one of the most un-American things I've ever heard, and I cannot believe that it is coming out of the mouth of Republicans and conservatives who should know better. It doesn't matter if Donald Trump is winning, leading in the polls 99% to 1. You don't shut down the people's voice. Ever. Ever. And this Colorado Supreme Court case should be a lesson to us all. Whether it's the Colorado Supreme Court that is trying to stop the will of the people, whether it's the RNC that is threatening to end the primaries. All right? No, you never shut down the will of the people. We do not have a tyranny of a majority in the United States of America. And we for damn sure should not be practicing that in the Republican Party or the conservative or constitutional movement. That is insane. That is un-American. And I know a lot of people will dislike me for saying that. So what? I'm sorry. I'm saying it because I love you and I love this country. All right. Now, let me move on from that. Guys, let me share with you a couple of stories here that I think are very important. And I really want to get to this issue with illegal immigration. Did you guys know that the Border Patrol has hit 12,500 encounters in a single day? Personnel is completely overwhelmed. That's not including the gotaways. Guys, our country is being destroyed. The fabric of the United States is being destroyed. Also, there's another story. Harvard University president faces other plagiarism accusations. Guys, the Republican Party should not be engaged in any type of identity politics, in my opinion. Just because this lady is black and black female doesn't mean that we should not be able to call out Claudine Gay. She actually literally stole excerpts and pieces from writings from Carol Swain, and now they're claiming that there's been 40 more incidents or 40 more allegations of plagiarism that she's alleged to have been guilty of. This lady should not be the president of Harvard. As simple as that. But let me circle back to this issue on the borders. All right, 12,500 encounters on the border in a single day. Guys, let me just run through real quickly. I was looking at the Center for Immigration Studies because we wonder, how does this stuff impact us? And some places are starting to feel the impact of illegal immigration. Some of you perhaps have not, but we all will when it comes to our taxpayer dollars. But also, there's 5 ways in which the Center for Immigration Studies started writing about a few years ago, in ways that it impacts the average everyday American, and that is through the labor market, through our schools, through medical care, through other welfare services, and public safety. So I just want to run through these real quickly here. Again, the labor market. So they go all the way back to October of 2021, when we were starting to see a major influx of illegal immigrants coming to the United States as a result of Joe Biden taking in or becoming president of the United States. And the left will argue, listen, this problem is only because of Donald Trump, and we're trying to fight the root causes. Well, we know what the root cause was. Joe Biden getting inaugurated on January 20th of 2021. That is the root cause of the open border crisis that we're experiencing right now. But I wanted you to consider this, the labor market. So since January 2021, the border crisis added 700,000 new workers to the labor market. Guys, this was a couple of years ago. Those numbers have skyrocketed since then. So now you're going to have a bunch of people that are competing for jobs in the labor force, low income, some middle income Americans that are going to have to compete in the labor force against illegal immigrants that shouldn't be in our country in the first place. So you're talking about more American citizens that are going to end up homeless, that are going to end up jobless as a result of competing against jobs against illegal aliens. Not to mention the cost of rent, the cost of mortgages are obviously going to go up because you're going to be competing for housing as well. So that is one of the ways in which illegal immigration impacts the average American voter. Also, schools. Guys, can you imagine you're a teacher in elementary, junior high, or middle school or high school having a classroom of 30 and then maybe having to jump to a classroom size of 40, 45, 50 because you have illegal immigrant children that are now in the country, and then compile that with the fact that a lot of these kids are not going to be able to speak English. Imagine how the teachers, there are some great teachers that are still out there, right? And so imagine the toll that that's going to take on the teachers. Imagine the time and energy that teacher is going to have to take away from your child in order to try to help these other children that, quite frankly, should not be in the country in the first place. Essentially, what's going to happen is you're going to dumb down the public school populace. These are ways in which it affects all of us. Medical care. Many of the new arrivals will receive medical care. You'll be paying for that. Many of them will use the emergency room as their healthcare system. Guess what? Taxpayer money, your money is going to pay for it, whether they pay for it or not. Other welfare services in places like New York City includes child care, housing, food, legal assistance, and more. So you have illegal residents taking up space, taking jobs, taking housing from American citizens, and you're footing the bill for it. You're footing the bill for it. And how's that Bidenflation going for you? And then you think about this. I mean, all of these now keep in mind, it's not just monetarily. What if you need to go to the hospital? Are you put in the back of the line? Public safety, Public safety has been insane. Crime has been rising. And obviously, we've already had a crime problem in blue cities. But how much more will the crime problem rise when you have illegal aliens coming from countries, some third world countries, that have not assimilated to the United States, feel entitled in the United States, and their first action was to break into our country? Do you really think crime is going to get better with 8 million at least new illegal aliens that have flooded or invaded the United States of America? It won't happen. Guys, stay tuned. I'll be back with more. We're going to laugh at liberals in the next segment. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. I appreciate you guys joining me today. Guys, I do want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I hope that the next year will be an amazing year. I hope that you will have an amazing Christmas. I hope that you will remember the reason for the season, that Jesus Christ was born. Jesus Christ took away our sins. He is worthy to be praised. It's an amazing time. I don't care what type of degenerate you might have been. I don't care what type of sinner you may have been. There has been a child that has been born. There has been a redeemer that has been born, that if you repent of your sins, he is faithful and just to forgive you of your sins and to cleanse you from all unrighteousness. He can redeem you, and he is the way to heaven. So I am so thankful for Christmas time, and we get to express that for Jesus's birthday. And for you theologians out there, I know it's not really Jesus's birthday, okay? But for Jesus's birthday, we get to give others gifts. We get to be generous. Make sure you say Merry Christmas. Make sure you say God bless you. Make sure you mention the name of Jesus Christ as much as you possibly can during this season to help people to understand that this is the real, or he is the real reason for the season. Okay, now having said that, Jesus Christ can cleanse us of any sin. He can forgive any degenerate. All right, and that is why I forgive Gabe all the time. But now, sorry, not made for TV. I'm just kidding. I joke with, I go back and forth with Gabe. Anyway, but I do want to bring you some funnies, if you will, because let's be honest, we're human and we like having fun and we like making fun of people, especially liberals. Gabe, don't you like making fun of liberals? I'm glad you agree, because we're going to start doing it. Guys, remember the Democrat Party and said that, we needed to move on from Trump in 2020 because the adults needed to take over. And then Joe Biden, when he was selected president of the United States, the media narrative and many on the left started saying, oh, finally the adults are in charge. But now you have people like Barack Obama that are saying, you know what? I think Joe Biden could lose in 2024 because they're starting to realize that the adults aren't in charge. You even have Democrats that are upset about this Supreme Court decision because they feel like all it does is embolden the former president. And so that's why I think things are going to get worse in 2024, even for Donald Trump himself, but also for you and I, because the only way the left can win at the ballot box is to cheat. Frankly, I don't think they can beat virtually any Republican, let alone Donald Trump. All right, so now, having said that, let's talk about the top 9 degenerate Democrat scandals under Joe Biden, courtesy of Breitbart. Appreciate them. So, guys, this is the most recent that I've talked about even on this show, and I think I gave it a little more credence than other people did. That was this latest guy that was found, this Democrat staffer of Democrat Senator Ben Cardin, where a graphic sexual video emerged. Where it was a Democrat staffer, a male, having gay sex inside of the Senate hearing room. He and his partner released this video on some type of website. That video, they say it was leaked, but leaked isn't the right word. I mean, if you're dumb enough to film yourself, committing a sexual act on video, you should probably understand that video is probably at some point or the other going to get out there in the ether. But this Democrat staffer blamed you and I for the video leakage, despite the fact that he and his partner filmed it, and he claimed that it was homophobia. And here's what I warned, because we looked at this video and we just said, or we looked at this story and we just said, okay, man, this is just about a gay guy doing a very stupid thing inside of the Senate hearing room. And I cautioned you that no, it's more than that. This guy felt entitled. This guy is a staffer. This guy is a lefty. And his first reaction was to go on the offense and try to put conservatives on the defense by yelling out homophobia. And this is one of the things I want conservatives to understand. The left is training their minions on how to be better leftists, to not react, but always refrain and put conservatives on the defense. So keep that story in mind. The next story, you guys may remember a porn webcam Democrat Virginia Senate candidate by the name of Susanna Gibson. So in September, the Washington Post revealed that Susanna Gibson, she was a Democrat candidate for the Virginia Senate seat, and a nurse practitioner had performed sex acts with her husband online where people could pay for them to do certain things. And she too ended up calling herself a victim. Now, she almost won her race, but thank God she did not. She lost, and almost won is a loss. All right, so she lost by just 1,000 votes. Otherwise, this chick would have been a Virginia senator, state senator. Absolutely insane. And then you guys might remember this story. We're talking about the top 9 degenerate Democrat scandals under Joe Biden. Number 3, the bag of cocaine that was found in the White House. I'm going to just take a second and pause. Typically, we professionals don't do this. They say don't do this in radio and TV. But I just want to take a second, and I'm going to allow you to conjure up in your own mind who may have been the owner of that cocaine bag. You ready? All right. Are we thinking the same person? Yeah, I thought so. All right. So we all know who that cocaine bag belonged to. It's the same person who, for whatever reason, is still flying to the United States that we're paying for, Marine One, whose name hasn't been placed on the visitor logs as often as he's been there. Someone I can't tell you his name, but his name starts or sounds like Hunter Biden. All right, now number 4, trans influencer Rose Montoya flashes his breast at White House picnic thing. I refuse to call a guy a girl. I'm not going to do it. If you want to participate in subjective truth, that is up to you. I will not do it. I will not call a man a man, a man a woman. I will not call a woman a man. If you were born a man, guess what? You die a man. If you were born a woman, guess what? You die a woman. When they dig your bones up in 100 years, 1,000 years, whatever it may be, if Jesus doesn't return, guess what? The DNA sample is going to show that you are either a male or a female. All right. It's simple as that. So this Rose Montoya, just a month before the cocaine gate scandal, the trans influencer at the Pride event at the White House exposed his fake breast at the White House event that was hosted by children. All right. That also hosted children. The trans influencer Rose Montoya pulled down his dress, grabbed his fake breast, and then obviously that circulated on social media. Number 5, the Navy enlisted a drag queen influencer to recruit more sailors. So you have, in May, the Navy revealed that it recruited a drag queen influencer, quote unquote, as part of a pilot program to help recruit more people. Do you suppose that's why the world is looking at us, even Iran, that are behind these proxy wars or these proxy assaults in the Red Sea against vessels, cargo shipping vessels? Do you think they looked at the Navy and said, well, you got a drag queen influencer recruiting more sailors. They're probably not going to be able to stand up to Houthi rebels. I mean, just something to think about it. Think about this. This is a degenerate party. Then you had the Democrat mayor that was arrested on child porn related charges. In March, the former Democrat mayor of College Park, Maryland, was arrested on dozens of charges of possessing and distributing child porn. The former mayor, reportedly a mentee of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, has been photographed with Nancy Pelosi and the like. Other high-profile Democrats, he resigned prior to his arrest. He was sentenced to 30 years in jail just last month. Then you have non-binary senior official, BDSM practitioner that was caught stealing luggage. I forget the name of the guy, but he was stealing people's luggage. He was getting wearing these very unique dresses, putting them on social media. And an African designer was able to recognize her work, her costumes that he had stolen. And he too was dressing as a woman. Then you have the Army colonel that was exposed in pup play in December of 2022. It was exposed that an Army colonel had taken photos of himself in a dog mask, including in what happened to appear an official Army photo. All right. This is a degenerate party. This is the party that is running the United States of America, and they should not be. And for whatever reason, I don't have the ninth thing printed out, but I will say this. Also, some that we may have forgotten about. Remember Andrew Gillum that ran against Governor Ron DeSantis that was caught in a hotel room on a cocaine binge, butt naked with a male stripper? That is the Democrat Party, and they were pushing that guy like nobody's business. And frankly, those of us in Florida thought that he was going to win. And not to forget, Eric Swalwell, representative from California, that was sleeping with a Chinese spy by the name of Fang Fang. This is the degenerate party that wants you to believe that the adults are now in the room, but the truth is the degenerates are in charge. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this week's edition of the Carl Jackson Show. Until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.